Maybe you have a favorite YouTuber that you watch who teaches these tunes. Hey fiddlers, welcome to today's fiddle video. Today we're going to be exploring the topic of how to learn a tune. It might seem like kind of a basic idea, but I think there are some tips and tricks that may help you as you try to figure out a tune for the first time. And we're going to cover a few things, including where to get new tunes and how to get ready to learn the tune, and then how do you practically learn the tune. Today I'm mostly going to be covering techniques for learning tunes by ear and different ways you might approach that. In the traditional fiddling world, that is often how we're learning our tunes. I create a lot of sheet music and practice tracks for traditional fiddle tunes, which people can learn from, and you can find a link for those in the description if you so choose. If you'd like a tutorial on the tune that I'm going to be using to demonstrate these ideas today, it's called The Merry Blacksmith. You can find a link for that in the description. So first of all, let's think about what the contexts are where we might learn a tune. Of course, we may be learning face-to-face from a teacher, maybe from someone at a workshop, at a music camp, or a music festival, so that's one way. Maybe you have a favorite YouTuber that you watch who teaches these tunes. Another way might be picking things up on the fly in a jam session, or you might just be picking up tunes from your favorite albums. If you're going the sheet music route, there are tons of collections of fiddle tunes out there to choose from. Okay, so those are some of the contexts in which we might learn fiddle tunes. Now we are faced with the daunting prospect of getting ready to actually learn the tune. And there are a couple of things that help us learn a tune before we actually even start trying to play it. The first thing is to kind of have a familiarity with the structure of a fiddle tune. This kind of gives us a picture in our minds of what the basic framework is of the tune that we're about to learn. Many fiddle tunes come in two parts, an A part and a B part, and you often play each of those twice. So knowing that there's a first half of the tune that's going to repeat and a second half of the tune that's going to repeat just gives you a little bit of orientation before you even start to learn the tune. So for example, in the tune The Merry Blacksmith, here is the A part of the tune. And then that happens again. You'll sometimes, not always, but sometimes encounter another structural thing happening. And that is that the first phrase of the part often comes back again later on in that part. And here's what I mean by that. The first phrase of the A part is, then the tune goes on, and we're back to that first phrase again in the second half of the A part. And then we wrap it up. So just knowing that you'll have a first phrase, second phrase, third phrase, which is often the same as the first phrase, and then the last phrase, that gives you another thing to kind of get oriented with. The same thing might happen in the B part. The B part goes, so the first phrase is, then it goes on. This next phrase is the third phrase. You'd expect maybe it's the same as that first phrase of the B part, but it's a little different. Instead of. But you can see how it mirrors that first phrase. You might also notice that the A part and the B part end with the same phrase. And that is also a pretty common thing. Here's one other thing that will prepare you to learn a tune. In addition to knowing something about the general structure of fiddle tunes, it's really helpful to just be familiar with the tune itself. For example, it's probably easier for you to learn Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on the fiddle than it is for you to learn an obscure Irish tune, partly just because you've heard Twinkle Twinkle 10,000 times. So how do we get familiar with a tune that we don't know yet? If you have the option, I would recommend two things. One is just to listen to it on repeat a gazillion times. And the other thing is to try singing along with it, usually after you've heard it a few times, just to really internalize it. There's something about singing a tune that I find really gets it into your system in a different way. So for example, if you're taking lessons, maybe you can find a recording of the tune that you're about to learn or that you're supposed to be working on and just listen to it a bazillion times, and then you're going to be a little more ready to learn it. In a session setting, you might just let the tune go around once or twice before you try to start diving in. And even if you're going to learn a tune by reading sheet music, I think listening to it ahead of time and even singing along with it gives you a better sense of the feel of the tune and just gives you a sense of direction with it. So that's how you might get ready to learn a tune. The actual process of learning it might take various forms. One of my favorite methods, and I use this in my tutorial videos and often when I'm teaching private lessons, is to break a tune into short phrases and just learn one phrase at a time. Usually these phrases are about 2 bars, and that's enough to give you one musical idea, and you can just practice that maybe 3 or 4 times before you move on to the next one. So if you're learning the Merry Blacksmith, someone might play, and you try, and then they play it again, and you try, and you just keep trying until you get a better basic idea of the phrase. Then you'll move on to the next phrase, the next phrase, the next phrase, etc. And in the end, you can piece the whole tune together. One more specific way of doing this, you might learn a 2-bar phrase like this, and then the next phrase, and then before you move on to the next phrase, try playing all of what you've learned so far. If you're using a recording to learn, you might just pause it after a short phrase and try playing it back, so using this method. All right, but let's say you're in a session setting, or maybe you're learning from a recording and you want to just try learning right along with the music. In order to do this, you might just start by picking up some easy phrases that you can hear in the tune, and then trying to just play that phrase every time it comes around and add on a little bit to it. Remember how we talked about how the first phrase of an A part or a B part often comes back around? So does the last phrase of an A part or a B part. So those might be some good ones to learn. And on YouTube, there's actually an option to slow down the video if you want it a little slower to play along with. Okay, so those are a couple of methods that you might encounter a lot if you're learning by ear. And just a quick note before we go about learning from the sheet music. If you're gonna learn from sheet music, I like the idea of listening to the tune ahead of time just so you have an idea of where it's going and what the general feel of the tune is. But one other thing to keep in mind as you're learning from sheet music, especially if you don't have an opportunity to hear it ahead of time, is just what fiddly techniques am I gonna apply to this music so that it sounds fiddly. That might be the bowings and ornamentation, emphasis, and all of those things that you're learning in other areas of your fiddling life. Maybe think about whether you can add some swing or a little bit of ornamentation or maybe some Georgia shuffle bowing. Just some things that make it sound a little more fiddly and maybe a little less etude-y. All right, fiddlers, that does it for today's fiddle video. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you would like sheet music and practice tracks that I create for a whole bunch of fiddle tunes, there is a link in the description for that. Happy fiddling, and I will see you soon.